As Sydney petrol prices push past 257 cents a litre, I need to tell you something the headlines are missing. This squeeze you're feeling at the pump? This is still the calm before the real mortgage and grocery shockwave lands. On April 9th, the CEO of one of the world's largest oil companies, Sultan Al Jaber, stated on the record, "The Strait of Hormuz is not open. It remains under political leverage." So the question you should be asking is, if the main artery for our oil is blocked, why isn't it $5 a litre already? The answer is that a 100-foot tsunami is already moving across the ocean, and it's headed directly for our economy. In the next few minutes, I am going to give you the data-backed timeline that the government and media aren't talking about. We're going to look at the invisible buffers creating this artificial calm, and I'll show you exactly when they are set to expire. So, where is this tsunami? To understand why it hasn't hit our coast yet, you need to grasp one simple but powerful concept. I call it the shockwave lag. Imagine you see a massive explosion miles away. Oh, you see the flash of light instantly. That's the news headline you saw about the crisis. But the shockwave, the actual physical blast, is still traveling towards you. You haven't felt the impact yet. That is exactly where we are right now. The reason for this lag is the hidden truth behind the illusion of normalcy. The petrol you put in your car today comes from crude oil that left the Persian Gulf weeks, even a month ago. It was already on the water, already in transit, before the blockade began. These oil tankers don't move at the speed of a jet. They move at the speed of a bicycle. It's a slow, multi-week journey. Look at this map. It's from J.P. Morgan Commodities Research, using data that tracks these tankers. It shows the oil shipments that departed the Persian Gulf before the February 28th blockade. According to their analysis, that pre-war oil stops arriving in Asia around April 1st. It stops arriving in Europe around April 10th, and the US around April 15th. For us, here in Australia, the last of that oil arrives around April 20th. After that date, the tankers that were supposed to be on their way, they never left the port. This lag explains why things still feel okay for now, but it also raises a much more urgent question. If the new supply was cut off weeks ago, what is plugging the gap between that last tanker and an empty Bowser? That artificial calm isn't an accident. It's being held up by specific fragile pillars. And understanding those is the key to knowing when the real shock truly hits. 3 specific fragile pillars. Understanding them is the key to knowing when the real shockwave hits. The first pillar you already know about. It's the last of the pre-war oil shipments. Those slow-moving tankers still arriving at our ports. But they are a finite resource, and the last one docks soon. The second pillar is financial markets. The market is a creature of emotion. It's pricing in the hope as he foreshadowed in the halt of a ceasefire. Every time there's a rumor of peace talks, the price dips, it's betting, it's gambling. Not on the physical reality of today, but on a potential future that may never happen. This creates a false sense of security while the actual physical shortage of oil gets worse every day. Then there's the third pillar. So this is the big one, direct government intervention. This is where they kick the can down the road with brute force. The International Energy Agency has coordinated the largest release of emergency oil reserves in history. We're talking 400 million barrels from 32 countries. Think about that. The biggest intervention ever. Even here at home, the government is cutting the fuel excise tax. It feels good, but it's a temporary patch that costs billions and masks the real price. These aren't solutions. They are emergency flares fired to signal just how serious the situation is. And they are finite. You can only drain the emergency tank once. So you have ships on the water, financial hope, and governments draining their reserves. All 3 are creating this illusion of normalcy. But here is the part that truly matters for your family's budget. What if I told you those buffers are for the rest of the world? That for us in Australia, our situation is uniquely exposed? We're about to see why 2 of those 3 pillars don't offer us the same protection they offer everyone else. Of those 3 global buffers, 2 are an illusion for us in Australia. The government stockpiles and the tankers at sea. First, let's talk about the stockpiles. Picture the world's strategic fuel reserves as a large full tank, the one the media talks about. Now picture Australia's tank next to it. It's tiny, and it's already draining. The international standard, the rule our government agreed to, is to hold 90 days of fuel in reserve. But look at the real numbers. Onshore, we hold around 39 days of petrol and just 33 days of diesel. And here is the part that no one is reporting. We are already using this emergency supply. Government data from early March shows they released hundreds of millions of litres of petrol and diesel just to manage the current calm. So while the world talks about tapping into its savings, we are already spending our emergency cash just to keep the lights on. Second, the tankers at sea. Why don't they protect us? Because we sit at the very end of the world's longest, most fragile supply chain. Nearly 90% of our refined fuel doesn't come from the Middle East directly. It comes from refineries in Asia, refineries that are themselves completely dependent on crude oil shipped through that now blocked strait. So you see how thin our defenses really are. The shockwave hasn't even fully hit, and our buffer is already eroding. Next, I'm going to show you exactly how this specific vulnerability translates into a direct, measurable hit on your mortgage. Here's the 4-step path that connects a crisis in the Middle East directly to your mortgage statement. It's the real shockwave. First, the delayed oil shock finally makes landfall in our economy. This isn't a trickle, it's a surge that pushes up the cost of everything. Second, that surge immediately fuels inflation. Forget any temporary relief you've been hearing about. Economists at places like NAB and Goldman Sachs forecast that a sustained high oil price could lift Australia's headline CPI by 0.7 to 1.5 percentage points. That's a huge jump. Third, the Reserve Bank is forced to react. They've already told us what they will do. An RBA assistant governor has put it on the record. A global oil shock risks locking in higher inflation, which would require a more restrictive policy stance. That is their direct language for keeping interest rates higher for much longer. And fourth, that's the hit that lands squarely on your household budget. Here's why it's so brutal for us specifically. Australia has one of the world's highest household debt-to-income ratios, at around 185%. What that actually means for you is that our budgets are stretched thinner than almost anywhere else on Earth. Every rate hike, or even just rates staying high when everyone else's are falling, squeezes your family's finances with extraordinary force. This isn't about abstract economics anymore. This is about your ability to get ahead. It's about the financial foundation of the family home. Now that you see the direct link, I'm curious, what are you more concerned about right now? The short-term pain at the petrol pump, or this coming long-term squeeze on your mortgage? Let me know in the comments. But if you think the pain stops at your front door, you're missing the true scale of this event. The mortgage is just the most direct impact. The real shockwave ripples much wider, and that's where the next level of risk to our financial stability is hiding. So, what is that next level of risk I mentioned? It's not just another rate hike or a new tax. It's something far quieter and far more fundamental. The slow, creeping contraction of our entire economy. Here's the core truth you won't hear in the mainstream news. The global system is currently missing between 11 and 13 million barrels of oil every single day. That isn't a financial problem. It's a physics problem. Energy is a fundamental input for everything. When you have less of it, the economy doesn't just get more expensive. It gets smaller. It physically cannot do as much work. What does that actually look like for you? This is the real shockwave. First, flights become fewer and more expensive. Airlines are already looking at cutting routes because the cost of jet fuel makes them unprofitable. Next, the goods on our shelves. The cost to ship a container across the ocean is directly tied to oil prices. Expect everything from furniture to electronics to get more expensive and harder to find. Then, your grocery bill. A United Nations analysis for our region, the ESCAP report, specifically warns that rising gas and oil prices will squeeze fertilizer production. Modern fertilizer is made from natural gas. Less energy means more expensive food. Finally, construction and technology. That same UN report highlights the risk to construction and even semiconductor supply chains. The very materials we use to build our homes and the chips inside our phones rely on complex, energy-hungry global supply chains that are now under extreme pressure. This is the real shockwave lag in action. It's not about one price going up, it's about the total capacity of our economy to produce, to move, and to build actually shrinking. This is why it feels like we're always one step behind. Now, most people assume that if the conflict in the headlines ends tomorrow, everything just snaps back to normal. They believe the crisis is over when the news says it is. They are dangerously wrong. The real damage isn't just the immediate supply disruption. It's the economic aftershocks that will ripple through the system long after the news cameras have gone. And understanding this aftershock period is the key to navigating what comes next. So let's be very clear about what this aftershock period is. It's the era where the cause of the crisis, the war, the blockade, is officially over, but the economic effects are not. The headlines will celebrate peace, but your household budget will still be feeling the pressure. This isn't just an opinion, it's a documented pattern. A 2024 study in the journal Nature found the economic impacts of major oil crises persist for 2 to 2.5 years on our groceries aftershock. The initial shock passes. There are 3 core reasons for this. First, global emergency reserves will be drained. Think of it as a national pantry that's been raided during a siege. The process of refilling those stockpiles creates a huge, sustained demand for oil that keeps prices stubbornly high, long after the immediate danger is gone. Second, you can't just flip a switch on damaged infrastructure. Repairing bombed-out oil terminals or sabotage pipelines takes months, often years, and billions of dollars. And finally, there's the logistical chaos. The International Energy Agency explicitly states that even after a conflict eases, it could take weeks or months just to untangle the web of stranded tankers and rebalance global supply chains. Here's the critical piece of foresight for you. While everyone else is breathing a sigh of relief because the news is telling them it's over, you will understand the real economic aftershock is just beginning. This is how you stay one step ahead. So, we've covered the initial shockwave lag, the artificial buffers holding back the tide, and now, this long aftershock period. Each is a piece of the map. Now, let's put it all together into the one framework you need to navigate what's coming. And this is it. This is the mental framework. The shockwave lag. It's the map you now have to see what's really happening, so you are never caught off guard again. It's a simple 4-step filter for every piece of news you hear from now on. First, you understand the illusion of normalcy. You recognize that the quiet we're in right now is caused by that delay. The economic shockwave is still traveling across the ocean. Second, you can spot the artificial buffers. When politicians talk about reserves or temporary relief, you see them for what they are. Sandbags that won't hold back the real flood. Third, you know Australia's unique vulnerability. You understand that our high household debt means we don't have the same defences as other countries. We are more exposed. Finally, you know the real impact is not a matter of if, but when. This framework gives you foresight. It gives you a sense of control because you have a clear map of an invisible threat that most people don't even know exists. The oil crisis that people think they are living through right now is still only the beginning. If you want to stay ahead of these shifts and protect your family's finances, make sure you subscribe for more analysis that cuts through the noise.